The most important thing I do every single week is my weekly reset. It's my opportunity to pause, to zoom out, and to review everything from the previous week, helping me to save thousands of hours of wasted effort. And I want to help you guys do the same. If right now you're not where you want to be in life, this could be a sign you're drifting rather than directing, living your life on autopilot rather than with intention. And I know how easily it happens, like I've been there myself. You get caught in this loop of doing, achieving, reacting, like one day you realize you're working super hard, but not necessarily moving in the right direction, like you're checking boxes, getting shit done, but you never stop to ask yourself, is this even what I want? The crazy realization that I had the other day was that most of us chase goals we inherit rather than goals that we consciously and carefully choose. We follow paths that are laid out by our friends, by our family, by our schools, by social media, by hustle culture and things like that, without really questioning whether or not those paths are meaningful to us. It's what René Girard calls mimetic desires. This is the idea that we don't really want things on our own, we want what other people want. We model our desires based on what's being validated or celebrated around us. For example, you see someone crushing it with their startup and then you decide, maybe I should go and start my own business. Or you scroll on social media and see someone run an ultramarathon, and from that you decide you're going to run your own ultramarathon too. You don't even realize it's happening, but slowly your internal compass starts getting replaced by borrowed expectations, and left unchecked, this can bring you wildly off course. And what I found is that the most concerning part of all of this is that you won't even realize it's happened until you've arrived somewhere you never meant to go. That's why I'm a huge advocate for doing a weekly reset. So let me show you what it involves. And if you're interested in using the same template I use, there's a link in the description section below this video. So every Sunday I block out 2 hours to complete my weekly reset. It doesn't normally take this long, sometimes I'm done in about half an hour or so, but the time is protected so I can think without distraction and to avoid blindly rushing into the new week just following whatever's on my calendar. Over literally hundreds of hours of doing this, I've refined this into a very simple system I use every week, built around 4 key elements that allow me to close the previous week with clarity and start the new week with intention. The idea is that each of these elements, or quadrants, I'm going to put this on the screen somewhere, represents a different lens through which to view your week. So you're not just writing down what you did, but also how you showed up, where you're going, and what actually matters next. I'm going to walk you through this system right now, but I also think it's important to mention that this isn't necessarily a one-size-fits-all system. Like what works for me might not work for you. Like your system might be slightly less structured, it might be more flexible, it might be longer, it might be shorter. It doesn't really matter. The goal here isn't perfection, it's alignment and intentionality. That being said, let's take a look at what my weekly reset involves. The first part is what I call personal ops, because it's about handling the essential maintenance tasks that keeps our personal life running smoothly. Things like clearing out our inboxes, sorting our notes, tidying our room, and dealing with any of the clutter that's built up over the previous week. Just like how a company has operations to keep things running smoothly behind the scenes, personal ops is about doing the same thing for yourself. Most people I found tend to skip this step because it feels a little bit like a chore. But I found that if my notes are scattered everywhere, my room's a bit of a mess, my inbox is overflowing, my brain tends to carry this weight, and this brain fog tends to leak into everything else that I'm trying to do. So rather than dragging that friction into a new week, I like to clear it first. So as you can see on the screen, I break down my personal ops into 2 separate parts. We've got tidying and tracking. So tidying is about clearing the mental, physical, and digital space, and largely involves resetting my physical space, like clearing my desk, putting things back in place, and just making my environment look nice again. Organizing my second brain, which mostly means clearing up my digital notes, as I'm always taking notes on the stuff that I find interesting, especially in Apple Notes, and then consolidating the various different tasks that I've written down within Apple Notes throughout the week. I do have a video on my second brain, so if you're interested in learning more about how I construct my second brain, then you might like to check that out. The other thing is processing physical clutter like receipts and unopened mail and just like random bits of paper I've got lying around, like, just this random stuff that's always on my desk. And then finally, in the tidying part, I have hitting inbox 0 across my emails, DMs, and other notifications. And this mostly means just quickly checking through my mail, answering any useful emails, and then archiving the rest. Then the second part of my personal ops section is tracking, and this is where I update a couple of key areas that I care about monitoring more closely. For instance, I have a fitness log, which essentially tracks how much I weigh, how many calories I'm consuming, my performance in certain key exercise, and just my general thoughts and feelings around my training process. And I've also got a finance tracker, which I also have a video on, so if you're interested in learning a bit more about that, then do check that out as well, which tracks my income, my expenses, and just where my money's going more generally. Once these two things are done, I feel far clearer, far lighter, and just far less cluttered in my mind, which sets me up really nicely to properly reflect on the previous week using the weekly wrap. The weekly wrap then is how I make sense of the week that just happened, not just in terms of how I showed up, but also how I felt and whether I think I moved in the right direction. I used to find it way too easy to get to the end of the week having ticked off a bunch of tasks and still not really know whether or not any of it actually mattered and brought me closer to where I wanted to be. So the wrap framework helps me to avoid this. Here's how this breaks down then. So firstly, wins. This is about surfacing the high points, so the big or even small moments throughout the week that we felt were meaningful or brought momentum into the week in some way. Too often we discount our wins or don't even consider what our wins are because we're already focused on what's coming next. But I found that celebrating these wins, even quietly, helps us to feel a lot more confident and also to feel happier. For example, one of my wins this week was publishing my first newsletter in about 6 months. So if you want to join the newsletter and check that out, you can do so below the video. And I also consider it a win that it was super sunny this week and I managed to get outside and enjoy the nice weather. The next part is results, and this is my reality check. It's where I hold up the mirror and ask, did I actually do the things I said I would? And this doesn't mean the simple stuff, but the stuff that actually moves the needle. It's really easy for us to get to the end of the week, having been very busy, answered a few emails, done a few menial chores, but this stuff isn't actually helping us to push our life forward. So this is very much focused on honestly assessing what meaningful stuff we've actually got done. For example, one of my goals at the start of the week was to run 30 kilometers. Nothing too crazy, if you're a runner, this isn't a serious amount of running, but it was enough to support my hybrid training, and I can see in my tracking app that I've actually managed to run 37 kilometers, which is glorious. The third part here is alignment, and this is where I zoom out and assess my actions and my results to see whether they are aligned with my personal values. And I find this is really important because without intentionally checking in on this stuff, I can often get to the end of the week having been very, very productive and yet still feel a little off, which is usually a sign that I'm operating out of sync with the things that are meaningful to me. For example, I really value doing things at a level I'm proud of and taking as much care over the things that I'm doing as possible. But over the last few days, I've noticed a couple of areas where I cut corners just to get that thing done faster, but afterwards I felt a little bit shitty for doing so. So over the next few days, over the next week, I'm going to focus on trading speed for quality. And then the final part of the wrap section is pivot, and this is where we decide what changes we need to make for the week ahead. Now, sometimes this is really obvious. For me, over the last week, I found myself saying yes far too often to things that weren't moving the needle. So the pivot I need to make is essentially reduce my inputs, protect my deep work, and say no more often. But sometimes the pivot or the change isn't quite so obvious. But then either way, I usually find there is something, even something quite small, that I can change for the week that's coming up, which massively changes the trajectory for the next 7 days. So once this is done, I close the loop on the past 7 days and then zoom out even further to take a look at my personal vision. Now, this is a relatively short part of the weekly reset, but I found that if we don't do it, we often get lost in the noise of the tasks and goals and deadlines that we're facing every single day. When we spend so much of our time looking down at our calendars, at our to-do lists, at our notifications, we often forget to look up. And when we don't look up, we lose sight of where we're going. So this part of the reset pulls me out of the week-to-week grind and asks, am I still building the life I want? And I'm mainly thinking about two different things when I do this through my future journaling exercise. Firstly, am I becoming the kind of person I actually want to be? And secondly, am I working on what matters to me? I also use this as an opportunity to reconnect with the long game by briefly reviewing my annual goals and also the 90-day goals that I set at the beginning of the quarter. You see, sometimes our goals expire, priorities shift, and what once may have lit me up at some point in the past may now feel quite heavy or quite forced. And if I don't stop to notice, I'll keep pushing forward out of momentum or pride instead of realigning with what matters to me right now. So this is my moment to course correct, to sort of update my internal compass before I start sprinting again. And once that's clear, once I know who I'm becoming and what's worth working towards, I can move with a lot more intention to the week ahead. The weekly map is the final thing I do, and it's where I set a clear, focused direction for the week ahead. After clearing friction with the personal ops, reflecting honestly in the weekly wrap, and then reconnecting with the bigger picture in the personal vision section, this is where everything crystallizes into action. Because clarity without commitment is useless. Like, you can journal all day, but if none of this stuff translates into what you do, then nothing's going to change. So this section is broken down into three parts. We've got milestones, actions, and plan. And with the milestones, I normally choose 1 to 3 key outcomes I want to hit this week. So it's not a full to-do list, but the core goals that I think would make this week a win. And they're usually tied to some kind of bigger project or long-term vision, such as a YouTube video that I'm trying to ship, or a training goal that I'm building towards, or a business outcome that I want to move forward, for instance. For example, my 3 key milestones this week are to publish a video on YouTube, to finalize a plan for an exciting launch I'm doing this summer, and to run 40 kilometers in total throughout the week. Once I've set my weekly milestones, I then break them down into actionable steps. The 3 to 5 most important things that I need to do to make progress on that particular milestone. And one of the most useful tools I found for determining what actions are the most needle-moving ones is something that is known as the $10,000 work framework, where you essentially categorize your work based on its leverage and impact, not just the time or effort you put into it. So you essentially have $10 work, $100 work, $1,000 work, or $10,000 work. $10 work is reactive. You're doing shallow, low-leverage tasks like clearing inboxes, organizing files, and answering emails. Like, this stuff feels super productive, but it rarely creates momentum. $100 work is what I would call tinkering. You're researching, you're optimizing, you're tweaking. Think things like updating your Notion system, trying out a new productivity app, watching some sort of tutorial on YouTube. It's comfort work, basically. Again, it looks busy, but you're mostly just hiding from what needs to be done. $1,000 work is skilled execution. Writing, designing, creating, coaching, problem solving, like, this is work that truly matters, but you're still in a one-to-one time trade. Then $10,000 work is high skill, high leverage work that we want to spend most of our time doing. It's the stuff that's going to compound over time. Things like building systems, creating assets, and just making strategic decisions about what you're doing and where you're going. The final part of this map framework is plan. So after locking in my actions, I need to make sure they're visible so I actually do them at some point throughout the week. That might mean putting those tasks into a paper planner or time blocking them in a digital calendar. I'm still trying to figure out the best approach for myself. At the moment, I loosely block these actions into my calendar, but I never feel wedded to do those tasks at the specific times I put them in the calendar. I just want to make sure the system is as simple and as easy as possible for me to follow through with. And there we have it. That is the weekly reset. Again, if you want access to the template and all the questions I ask each week, I've dropped a link below this video. And if you think there's anything I should add, then I would love to hear what your weekly review looks like, because this is genuinely the most powerful thing I do to stay clear, focused, and intentional with my time.